Hello and welcome to this special frontline webinar on After Khaleda and Hasina, what lies ahead for Bangladesh and India. First, today we will look at what's happening in Bangladesh. Elections are scheduled for the 12th of February. The Bangladesh National Party leader, Tariq Rahman, who is now said to have been in exile for 17 years. Earlier, they used the term hiding. This shows, how these terms change. He's back in Dhaka. A number of alliances are being formed for the 300-member Jatiyo Sansad, with 50 members being reserved for the women's category, which will be decided by proportional representation. So essentially, you need 151 seats in the directly elected seats to form a government. So what lies ahead? We are seeing a number of alliances. The Awami League, as you know, is banned and is not able to contest. The BNP, the Bangladesh National Party of late Prime Minister Khaleda Zia, has not allied with the Jamaat-e-Islami. The Jamaat-e-Islami, on its part, has allied with the National Citizen Party, which is an offshoot or a growth from the popular protests that led to Sheikh Hasina's ouster. So lots of balls in the play. In the meantime, Bangladesh-India relations, as you know, over Mustafizur Rahman, the player who was selected to play for KKR, for the IPL. He's been asked to go back by the BCCI. Bangladesh, in a tit-for-tat move, has now suspended visa and consular services for Indian nationals, bar essential ones. So it is quite a mix. First, we will look at what's happening internally. And I'm joined today by Ramanathan Kumar, former head of RAW in Bangladesh in the early 90s, knows the country well. He's been following it for a while. And I know the interest levels, unfortunately, in India are not as high about Bangladesh as they are, say, about Pakistan. It doesn't kind of, generate the same passion or emotion, which may or may not be good. But I'm going to ask Mr. Kumar first. Can you paint the big picture for us, for our viewers of this webinar, on the run-up to the elections? How do you see the formations ranged and what might happen?
Well, good morning and thank you very much for having me on the show. Before I do that, may I just make a small observation? I am old, but not so old that I was in Bangladesh in the early 1990s. It was
my apologies. My apologies.
Not at all. It was purely in a lighter vein. But so that apart, let's get down to the real business. Ambassador Archer Blood, who was the Consul General in Dhaka during the War of Liberation and was the author of the famous Blood Telegram, talked of the cruel birth of Bangladesh. And another famous author, Anthony Mascarenhas, wrote about Bangladesh's legacy of blood. It was a very famous book. Now, Bangladesh has indeed had did have a cruel birth, and it has had a legacy of blood. And I dare say it has had a cruel adulthood also. So it has had a turbulent history, as all of us know. But even by those turbulent standards, I think the present is a particularly turbulent and volatile phase in the history of Bangladesh. And I am reminded to some extent of the chaotic situation which prevailed, towards the end of 1975, after the assassination of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and before, President Ziaur Rahman consolidated his rule. There was a very turbulent period at that time, and nobody really quite knew what was going on. And I dare say that it is, we are looking at a somewhat similar sort of picture right now. And it would be a brave person who would, really venture to say categorically as to what is going on.
No, looking at the broad trend.
Since you asked about how the forces are ranged,
Yeah.
What I would say is yes, elections are scheduled to be held on the 12th of February. The Awami League has been debarred from taking part in the elections, which raises grave doubts ab initio about the credibility of the election. Because if you have one of the major players not being in the picture, then such an exercise, as I said, ab initio, there will be question marks about its legitimacy. You have, of course, on the other hand, the BNP, which boycotted previous elections or was not allowed to take part, now back in the fray. Their erstwhile partners, the Jamaat-e-Islami, as you very rightly said, there was a time when they were, coalition partners, when they were both ranged against the common foe, which was the Awami League. This time, the common foe is not there, so it's not surprising that they are not at this point of time in any agreement, or
But they still need allies, clearly, the Jamaat. The Jamaat clearly
Pardon?
needs allies. I said the Jamaat clearly needs allies.
Well, the Jamaat clearly needs allies, but possibly they also feel that the ground is maybe fertile for them now to do much better than they have had in the past. And indeed, I think there are some studies available, polls available in the public domain, which do suggest that they might do better than they have ever done in the past. So they may have there may be a feeling within the Jamaat that they can strike out on their own this time. One really doesn't know. So they have an ally in the form of you mentioned, the National Citizens Party, which is they are the new kids on the block, so to speak. They emerged from the student movement of 2024. We don't know. They have no track record. We don't know how they will do. But as we're all aware, there will be many new voters in Bangladesh this time. The population, half the population of Bangladesh is below the age of 30 or 25. There'll be many new voters this time. One doesn't know how they will vote. There's no previous track record. There are question marks. What happens to this solid 35-40% who always voted for the Awami League? That is the constituency which stands for the ideals of the liberation war, the liberal secular sections of Bangladeshi society. How they are not going? If they are not going to vote at all, then there may be a drop in the voter turnout. That is a big question mark. But hanging above all this, Amit, if I may raise the issue, I think there is enough information available in the public domain that the forces of extremism and radicalism, they see an opportunity now. They have always been there in Bangladesh. They now see an opportunity, to come to discredit the entire system of parliamentary democracy and say that this is antithetical to Islam, and Bangladesh's destiny lies in moving towards a pure Islamic rule, and so on and so forth. And these voices, as I said, there are studies, there are serious observers who have said that these forces have gained, unfortunately, a lot of ground in the last few weeks and months. They have been, and there's also, an
I just
enormous
want to
amount.
stop you here for 1 second and
Please.
ask you. Yeah, and these Islamist courts forces have always been in Bangladesh. Jamaat-e-Islami, we all know the role it played in the 71 War of Liberation. But they have never won more than 30 seats, if I'm not wrong, in any election, since independence. So do you believe that this time it could be different?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Now, the Jamaat, for instance, now the Jamaat at least, cooperates or operates within the parliamentary framework. Their long-term goal, of course, is to set up, an Islamic state or whatever. As far as their, and we also know, just like the Jamaat-e-Islami in Pakistan, the Jamaat, for instance, and its student wing, the Shibir, as it is called in Bangladesh, the Islamic Chhatro Shibir, they have more street power than electoral power. As far as their popular electoral appeal is concerned, you're absolutely right. On an average, the Jamaat has not won more than 4 to 5% of the popular vote. They struck an all-time high of around 12% in 1991, came down to around 8% in 1996, and then, as I said, this 4.5% or so in 2001, 2006. So, in terms of electoral appeal, they've never won, any significant percentage of the vote share like their counterparts in Pakistan. But I am reminded, and I think many others who watch South Asia closely will be reminded, say, for example, of what happened in Nepal, in the 2008 Constituent Assembly elections. The mainstream political parties had all got thoroughly discredited there, the Nepali Congress and the NCP UML, and the far left, the United People's Front, who then, it was those parties and their leaders who then went on to form the Nepal Communist Party, the Maoists, the NCP Maoist. The Maoists were an unknown commodity at that time, and the people of Nepal decided that since these mainstream parties have failed us completely, let us give the untested force a chance. And the NCP Maoist performed spectacularly well in the 2008 elections. Something similar could happen in Bangladesh as well, as far as the Jamaat is concerned. I mean, it may happen, it may not happen, but one certainly can't rule it out.
But what is your sense? What about the BNP itself? I mean, the major contender, the major power. I mean, we have a situation where the former Prime Minister has just passed away. There's obviously some sympathy factor also that might come into play. So, what is your sense of how the BNP, which is clearly a big force in Bangladesh, how do you think it will perform?
Yes, well, a straightforward reading, and I think that is the conventional wisdom. Like the Awami League, which has a solid core vote bank of 35 to 40%, that is roughly the vote share of the BNP also. There is little reason to think that this vote bank, which has always been loyal to the BNP, which believes in the BNP's core ideology of Bangladeshi nationalism as opposed to Bengali nationalism, which underpins the ideology of the Awami League, that this section is unlikely to desert the BNP. They are likely to remain loyal to the BNP. And therefore, if an election is held, there are, I would still say, some question marks, even though you may call them lingering question marks, whether the law and order situation will allow the election to be eventually held. Don't forget, there is still a little more than a month to go. But as I said, should the election take place as scheduled, and you have there is the conditions.
Everything seems to suggest that the elections will happen.
Right. In that case, the straightforward reasoning would be that the BNP's vote share being what it is, they would come to power. They would get a majority, whether it is a comfortable majority or a landslide or whatever remains to be seen. But they would get a majority and be able to form a government in the absence of the other principal political party of the country, the Awami League. And that will set the stage, I dare say, unfortunately, for the next round of sort of confrontation to begin, as it were.
And what is your sense? You made the point, earlier in our discussion that, the key thing will be the vote of the Awami League. Where will that vote go? And what is your sense? I mean, will it go to different forces, or will it sort of, scatter, or will it, go to a more mainstream sort of force? How do
No,
you
I
see?
don't think so. I think something similar to what has happened in the past. Unfortunately, what happened to the vote bank of the BNP in 2000, 14 and 19. I think many of them simply didn't vote. You have the Jatiyo Party, which has played a kind of a occupied, tried to occupy some kind of a space between these two parties. But unfortunately, the Jatiyo Party itself is fractured. There are at least two major factions. So my sense is that, as I said, the liberal secular sections of the Bangladeshi society, Bangladeshi electorate, which have traditionally, which sort of subscribe to the ideals of the liberation war, have remained steadfastly loyal to the Awami League. I think they will. I think large sections will largely possibly sit out this election. I don't see their vote going anywhere else. And to that extent, I think it will also lower the voter turnout. That would be my sort of reading.
And going ahead, I just want you to, touch on some of the events. One was, of course, the killing of this Inkilab Moncho leader, Sheikh Usman Hadi, by all accounts, quite a popular leader in Bangladesh. And there are allegations of, involvement of, I don't know, Indian sources, whatever. I mean, we'll deal with that later. But I'm also very interested in asking you about the attack on the offices of Prothom Alo and Daily Star, as well as some cultural organizations. What does that represent for Bangladesh? And who are the forces you think who are behind this kind of it? Because it was a very serious situation. From whatever I've read, in the Daily Star office, people were just locked up. And had they no access to the terrace, many of them perhaps would have been, burnt alive in that attack. So it was a very, very serious situation. And these two newspapers, especially the Daily Star and Prothom Alo, have been really targeted by these protesters.
Yes, that's right. And I would, begin by saying, that it is a capital mistake to theorize without facts. So, I don't have the totality of the facts at my command. So, therefore, I would, hesitate to venture a guess or point fingers at any particular group or elements who are behind these attacks. But there are two or three broad points that can be made. The attacks, the deliberate targeting of minorities, the attempts to erode law and order, the attacks on the mainstream media, as you said. Some points can be made. I think one is that there are forces which are deliberately out to create friction between India and Bangladesh. That is the purpose behind the systematic attacks on the minorities, because whoever is doing this knows that it will elicit a reaction on our side, and that will then elicit a counter reaction on the other side. So whoever is doing this obviously knows that this is exactly what it will happen. This is exactly what will happen, and this is the situation that they are trying to precipitate. Secondly, as far as the attack on the Prothomalo and the Daily Star are concerned, that is exactly what I was referring to when I talked about the forces of extremism and radicalism. Trying to exploit these conditions in Bangladesh. I think the message that is being sent here is that that these sections of, the so-called, liberal sections of the media, and I think the Daily Star and even Prothomalo would fall in that category, that these are all in some ways, I will use the expression that the Islamists themselves use, because as I said, there are serious studies in the public domain which have referred to this. that these are un-Islamic, institutions. They are takfir, or they are apostate, and they should all be got rid of. I think it is from that direction, people who want to discredit the entire liberal democratic process in which the state, the democratic state, the parliament, the free media, cultural organizations, all these are being sought to be delegitimized, and the stage set for a far more sort of obscurantist vision of society to be imposed. I think that is the direction from which all this is broadly coming.
We have seen in the past, these forces of extremism, Islamist extremism operating in Bangladesh. Is it your sense that this period of the interim government, which has not been really able to handle law and order in the way it should, do you think that these forces have now been strengthened and the challenges might be greater dealing with them?
Indeed, at this point of time, I would say so, and that has been the great tragedy, or that is the pity. The As we are all aware, and I think it is no great secret. I mean, uh, the Western countries are among those who had an uneasy relationship with former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. They are widely believed to have, backed, the interim government with the help of civil society and so on and so forth. And they, in a sense, the interim administration appears to have had the blessings of these countries. And I dare say that while these intentions perhaps may have been noble, I think we in India know this region better, and the forces that are at play here. And when you install inexperienced people at the helm of affairs, and I think this is a fairly charitable interpretation, that when inexperienced, untried, untested forces are at the helm of affairs, then I think the situation goes out of control very quickly. And that is what has happened, seems to have happened in Bangladesh in the last 1 year or so, 1.5 years. The interim administration was installed amidst great hopes of, reform and change and cleaning up, etc. But none of that seems to have happened. And in fact, in many ways, the system seems to have gone from bad to worse. And I think many of the backers of the interim administration, those who had high hopes in its ability to clean up, the act, are now rather disappointed, and they're very apprehensive, very anxious about the future. It is unfortunate, but I think that is how it is.
Right. So we have, a couple of questions. There's one observation which I want to read out, just an observation, and this is from Pushpinder Singh. He said that India needs to look inwards. He says we shouldn't divert our time, energy, and resources towards our neighborhood, and period in all caps. So I'll leave that, just there as an observation, as a comment. And then we have a question. I think now we are getting into the hard bits of what happens with India, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and the neighborhood and so on, the role of third countries, if at all. So we have a question from Debansu Saha, and he says, how has India lost influence in a period of less than 1 year? Has India lost interest in having a peaceful neighbor around? How is the Chinese interest playing out? In general, a communist. Anyway, we won't go into the entire bit of the question. And then we have another related question from Amrit Rawal, who's asking, Bangladesh has adopted a very hostile position against India and seems to have joined hands with General Munir to give India another 1,000 cuts, which has been the policy of Pakistan. How can India counter this situation? Maybe we can take that first.
All right, we'll then begin with the second question. You know, I think one should also, there is a danger in all this that we look only at, the short term, or we only see the events of the immediate past and trend and forget the larger history of the relationship. Now, there have been, in fact, India-Bangladesh relations have been, characterized less by clear-cut black and white situations, and it's often been in shades of gray. At times, the gray being of a darker shade, and at times of a lighter shade. But none of these things are entirely new. There have been numerous ups and downs in the relationship between India and Bangladesh. I refer to the situation prevailing in 1975, immediately after the assassination of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. That again was a period where, India, immediately after the liberation of Bangladesh, had a lot of influence there. We spent a lot of, we invested a lot of blood and treasure, both in the liberation war, in helping Bangladesh in its liberation war, and in reconstructing the country immediately after the liberation. But very soon, the goodwill towards India dissipated. And even before the Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was assassinated, we saw Bangladesh moving closer towards the Islamic countries, moving closer towards Pakistan, the Americans and the Chinese, coming back to Bangladesh and making their presence felt there. And India's the position of preeminence that India had was diluted very quickly after the liberation of Bangladesh. Then we've had long periods during, say, for instance, the rule of President Ershad. It was not a very comfortable time for India and Bangladesh. Many of the Indian insurgent groups from Bangladesh actually went and re-established themselves in Bangladesh at that point of time. In the first term of Sheikh Hasina also, the situation was not very comfortable. That government didn't have a very firm grip over the administration, and there were many holdovers from the previous dispensation in that government. So again, it was an uneasy situation. Then, of course, things went from bad to worse between 2001, 2006. That was indeed a very dark chapter in India-Bangladesh relations. Bangladesh had become a veritable security nightmare for India at that point of time, when the BNP and the Jamaat were in an alliance, although the BNP was very much the senior partner. The Pakistani terrorist groups, the Lashkar, the Jaish, etc., had a free run of Bangladesh at that point of time. The Indian insurgent groups, the ULFA, the NDFB, the UNLF, the NLFT, the ATTF, all of them were based in Bangladesh, from where they were conducting attacks in India. The August 2008 Assam blasts took place in India at that point of time. Then we had 1.5 decades, of uninterrupted peace, and when Bangladesh took decisive action against, the groups which were targeting us. But now the wheel of history seems to have turned once again. And now Pakistan, which was, I'm coming to that question which was raised. You talked of Pakistan, General Munir, and so on and so forth. Well, it is for a decade and a half, Pakistan felt that they had been marginalized. They were out of the picture. A country where they had managed to regain a foothold and re-establish their influence, and exploit it to the hilt to carry out terrorist attacks against India and carry out conduct activities inimical to India's interests, uh, they now sense that they once again have an opportunity. So I am sure that in coming, months and years, they will make a concerted effort to, regain their lost influence and go back to the mischief that they had been indulging in from Bangladesh in the past. And this is where the great danger lies, and this is where we have to formulate our strategies accordingly. And since you mentioned China, of course, 2 points very quickly, because I suspect that my answer may have become rather long. One, of course, is let us not forget the fact that China's strategy has all along been to reduce our strategic influence in our own neighborhood. And China is now vastly more powerful than it was in the past. And of course, China now, as we all know, backs Pakistan to the hilt. They have always done so. They're now doing so more than ever. And therefore, if you have Pakistan trying to exploit Bangladeshi territory to create difficulties for us, you have China backing Pakistan. So that is how I think that is the broad picture.
Mr. Kumar, I just want to ask you about India's relationship with the Awami League and Sheikh Hasina more recently. I mean, is it that India and Indian diplomacy has placed all its eggs in one basket? And, obviously you can't see many events forthcoming, but, is that all there is to our Bangladesh policy?
So I'm very glad that you asked that question. It is a fundamental question, and I think it deserves a serious answer. I would, start with that old saying that in international relations, there are no permanent friends or enemies, and there are only permanent interests. And India Bangladesh relations are no exception. India also has permanent interests in Bangladesh. And what is our core interest in Bangladesh? I would say that our core interest in Bangladesh is our national security, which is non negotiable. So we want to make sure that Bangladeshi territory is not exploited or misused for carrying out activities prejudicial or inimical to India's national security. This has been our fundamental long term core interest in Bangladesh. Now, for whatever reason, uh, you know, uh, there has been one, section of of the Bangladeshi polity, which is sensitive to some of these concerns. Sometimes even they have not been as sensitive as we would like them to be, but at other times they have been. On the other hand, there are also forces who feel that, well, you know, it is in Bangladesh's interests to disregard these core interests and turn a blind eye to, say, the kind of activities that Pakistan conducts from Bangladeshi territory. Now, what do we do in these circumstances? To expect us to say that, to forget these things, I think would be no government in New Delhi can do that. And therefore, I mean, I'm reminded of another old saying that it doesn't matter whether the cat is black or white as long as it catches the mice. So we don't distinguish between a black cat or a white cat. We want to make sure that our core security interests are taken care of. And if those are disregarded, or if there are any forces or any sections of the Bangladeshi polity which say that, well, we will disregard these interests, then that has certain consequences. So I think that is our core interest, and it's not that it is not favoring one party over another. That I think is to
But we
uh,
also have now
take
a
the wood from the trees.
we also now have an ousted prime minister, living in Delhi. I mean, there's a different quality to the relationship, and you might say that India did what it had to do for its friend, but obviously this is going to have some implications for whatever government comes to power in the future in Dhaka. So, how do you think India is going to play this really?
So this is it is a delicate question, but I will let me put it this way. Let me give you, I think again here the simplistic reading is that this is this is an issue which is which has led to a lot of anti-India feeling coming to the fore in Bangladesh, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who would say that, well, or I'm sure there would be people who would say that, well, why doesn't India, say, for instance, accede to the request to extradite Sheikh Hasina? Now, let me give you one, say, powerful reason for not doing so. Uh, I think it can well be said, it can well be argued that her trial itself has not been a fair trial, and the death sentence in absentia that has been handed down to her has been handed down under the pressure of mob violence and extremist propaganda, almost under duress. So. And say extraditing somebody like us, extraditing her to Bangladesh would strengthen the very forces of extremism and radicalism which are trying to expand their space in Bangladesh. And these forces would get emboldened very greatly if any such development were to take place. And in fact, any such step would possibly lead to
No, I was
greater
not talking about extradition
bloodshed in
necessarily.
Bangladesh.
Yeah, I was just talking about how we
So,
play it. But we'll take a question which has just come in, and it's an interesting question, Mr. Kumar. It's from Yuvraj Sankla, and he's asking: in recent times, India's relations with many nations are not seen quite as good as in previous times. Is all this because of other nations like US or China, or is it the weakness of India's diplomacy? I think the latter bit of the question, really applies to Bangladesh and India as well.
well, I think I would not like to make a generalization about India's relations with all its neighbors. We treat all of them, on merits, one by one. So, the I think the important thing, of course, is that uh, I go back to the very first question about our own internal strengths, and I personally think, this is a personal opinion of mine, that India's influence in this region is largely a function of its own of its own comprehensive national strength. If we do well at home, and our economy is strong, then I think India will attract, and we have a harmonious society at home, then India will exert a certain gravitational pull on the entire region. And as India grows and prospers, so will the rest of the region along with us. I think that has to be our effort at all times. And I will just leave it at that, instead of making a generalization about our relationship with all the countries of the region.
We also have, picking up on the point of the harmonious society, we have these lynchings of Hindus in Bangladesh, and we have a lot of attacks on and killings of Muslims in India. And when you talk about a harmonious society, and we've also seen, several of our political leaders in the ruling dispensation, using very derogatory language about Bangladeshis in general. So how does that sort of gel? And if this gravitational pull has to be exerted, as you rightly say, that the economy and a harmonious society, work in tandem. So if we don't project that image of a harmonious society, and we have so many, problems and people to deal with in our own country, how then do we speak about the affairs of another country?
Well, I think you have a point there, and I think nobody can dispute that or disagree with the fundamental point that you make. I think India's great strength ever since the time of independence is that we have set an example for the other countries of the region. And that is why they have respected us, they have looked up to us, and they have admired us. That has always existed, coexisted with a certain degree of, you can call it resentment or suspicion, etc. That has been the broad paradigm of our relationship with most of the countries in the region. And I, at least in my mind, am confident that it is that position that we have to maintain if we are to retain the position of preeminence in our neighborhood.
And what's your sense? I mean, whatever government comes to power in Bangladesh, uh, with the interim government, I think the Modi government did well to send Dr. Jaishankar, for Khaleda Zia's funeral. I mean, what should be the approach really that India should adopt towards any new government?
So I think quite clearly we have to deal with whichever government comes to power in Bangladesh. We have to be cognizant and we have to remember the past because, as I said, forgetting the past, the experiences of the past is not an option. But then we cannot be prisoners of the past. So we have to remain optimistic and we have to engage, which I'm sure the government will, with whichever dispensation or whichever government comes to power in Bangladesh. But we also have to make our bottom line very clear. And as I said, in Bangladesh, our core security concerns are very clear. As long as those are upheld and those are respected, I think we would have absolutely no problem at all in working, with whatever government comes to power in Dhaka. Equally, at the same time, I would say that the forces of pluralism, inclusiveness, the very values which underlay the liberation war of Bangladesh. These are the forces that have with which we have traditionally enjoyed good relations, and we must continue to, I think, extend full support to them as well, especially if we are to keep the forces of extremism and radicalism at bay, as I said. And I think that is in the interest of both Bangladesh, India, and the wider region.
We also have a bit of a naughty problem on the cricket front, after this decision to, not let Mustafizur Rahman play the IPL. We have a situation where in the T20 World Cup, the Bangladeshis are saying now that they don't want to come to India to play cricket. and that their games should be shifted to Sri Lanka. I mean, how does one deal with this kind of a situation? Because obviously, you know how cricket crazy people are in Bangladesh and how cricket crazy people are in India. So, I mean, obviously, at the people to people level, this is bound to create, a kind of dissonance.
Well, that is true. I am not a cricket administrator, but I am a cricket fan, and personally, I do believe in the power of sport, just like culture, literature, and so on and so forth, to bring people together. Yes, and I think fundamentally it is not a very good idea to mix sports and politics, and so therefore. Uh, uh, I think it is unfortunate that that this has happened. I would love to see an IPL or a tournament where uh, players from all countries participate as a purely as a sports enthusiast, particularly as a cricket enthusiast. But this is the great danger of overreactions, then leading to further overreactions and counter reactions, and the entire atmosphere getting vitiated. It is unfortunate.
Well, I think to wrap up, Mr. Kumar, I'm going to give you, that last big opportunity to see, gaze into your crystal ball. And as you said, you may not have all the facts, but your crystal ball is very much there, and it's crystallized over all these years that you've been looking at Bangladesh. So, what is your sense? Where do India and Bangladesh go from here? Some may think there are not no options are good for India, but we have a situation, the ground realities are there. So where does this relationship go from here?
So I think, irrespective of the results of the elections, I think the recent past has shown that, uh, you know, the forces of extremism and radicalism are trying to expand the space available to them in Bangladesh. This is the great danger that I see. And even, the best solution, of course, is a democratically elected government coming to power in Bangladesh. And But even I think any government that comes to power following an election will find it difficult to control some of these forces that sort of appear to have strengthened their influence in Bangladesh in recent months. And therefore, I think from our side, we will have to work with any government that comes to power in Dhaka. But at the same time, uh, it would be in our interest to strengthen the forces of, democracy, pluralism, inclusiveness, secularism, and the forces which have, which subscribe to the ideals of the liberation war of Bangladesh. It would be entirely in our interest to extend support to these forces as well. I think that is more or less how I would sum up the situation.
Well, Mr. Ramanathan Kumar, thank you so much for talking to Frontline and explaining what lies, the context and where we might go from here. Thank you so much for your time, and we will be watching, of course, what happens on the 12th of February in Bangladesh. And as an aside, my apologies again for. Describing you as being posted in Bangladesh in the early 90s when you were there in the 2000s. No reflection on your age at all. Thank you so much, Mr. Kumar, for your time and for your expertise. And we do hope we will return to you at some point to discuss the post election scenario in Bangladesh.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.